Are you an only in your workplace? Maybe you're the only woman, the only person of color on your team. If so, you'll relate to the experiences shared by my guest this week, Carrie Driscoll, co-founder of Reef Consulting. Here, Carrie shares her career journey from winning a college scholarship as the only female in computer science, to working in software startups, to eventually founding her own consulting firm. Carrie shares how she navigates self-doubt and offers tips and strategies we can all use to show up more confidently at work. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Carrie. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today, and I would love to start by inviting you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kim. I'm excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. So introduce myself. So Carrie Driscoll, I'm president and chief agilist of Reef Consulting. I professionally grew up in software, mostly startups, technical background. I was in quality assurance and part of that technical support, but went into becoming more of an agile transformation agent as I learned more about how powerful that framework is, that philosophy and that way of working is for creating really powerful autonomous teams to get things done, right? So we have these amazing people on these teams and you just let them go. As long as you give them those guidelines, you let them go and they love it and they do well and they're happy at work and all those things make for these great high performing teams. So I enjoy helping build those in organizations. And I've been doing that ever since. I got recruited out of software into a consulting company and moved through the ranks there, quickly became head of the practice and just helped both coaches, scrum masters, and the clients with these things. I did a lot of matching of some of these phenomenal coaches that are out there and scrum masters that are out there with clients and industries in order to help them get through that transformation aspect more quickly and help them build their teams. So now I have Reef Consulting, my own practice, and it's been great. And I have this amazing network of people, and I'm really just out there helping clients with getting the best things done, the right things done at the right time, and having the information to make their decisions as they go.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would love to ask you a question just generally of how has your experience been as a woman in the tech sector, having grown up there and experienced it in different ways, right? It sounds like, you maybe worked for software startups, worked for consulting, and now you have your own. What has that trajectory looked like for you?
So initially I was very naive, although I obviously realized I was one of many. I mean, I think I did. I actually got a scholarship in college because I was the only woman in computer science major. So they gave me a scholarship just for that. So I was, there were very few women in tech when I was going through school and when I was starting out. And it's interesting because I do recall one situation in Boston, walking out of a big engineering meeting with one of my companies, and as I was standing there waiting for the team to come out, and like it was a lot of men coming out the door, a woman walked up to me and said, "Shame on you." And I kind of looked at her and I said, "Excuse me?" Like I felt like maybe I insulted her some way. And she's like, How can you stand here, be a part of this organization that is all men? You're one woman and all men." And I kind of like was taken aback, like, okay, first off, I didn't understand my role in that. Like, what am I supposed to do about that? She doesn't know me. And at the time I was, yes, I was head of QA, but there was very little, well, I shouldn't say that. in retrospect, I'm sure I could have tried to do a little bit more. But anyway, it was interesting. And I almost looked back at her and you think about things after. I should have turned around and said, well, shame on you for reaching out to the only woman in the group and saying, shame on me. Like, why didn't you talk to any of those guys?
Right. Right.
So odd. But it did, make me think about that fact more at that time than I had been. And it was interesting. I had a leader at that time that was very into, diversity. And I was putting together an internship program. And that was one of the things he said. He said, let's try to get more women involved and young women involved in tech, thinking about the excitement of being part of a tech team. So, I mean, I don't know if it was allowed HR wise, but we went ahead and we went to schools that were, all women, colleges and stuff, and got some great interns that were interested in technology and brought them in. And some of them are still working in tech, which is great to think back on now. But yeah, it was a strange time. Mm-hmm. So being one of, it was not the easiest thing in the world. And I do recall later, as I started learning more and more about unconscious bias and stuff like that, I realized I was doing all of those things, starting my sentences in these meetings where I was a part of like the leadership team. And I'd still start my sentence with like, oh, I'm sorry, can I just say one thing? You're sitting at an executive team meeting and you say, I'm sorry. Like, why are we saying I'm sorry? Nobody offended me, or I didn't offend anyone, just speaking. So yeah, it's interesting how we kind of self-sabotage in a way. And so I guess as I became more and more aware, I decided to become more aware, like actually go out and learn more about how can I myself stop these practices and get better at empowering myself. And I'm here for a reason, understanding my value and not self-doubting, although that one's the hardest one. But also empowering others around me, whether they're men or women, right? I mean, men have imposter syndrome as well.
That's right.
It's just, I think the statistic is 18 or 20% more women do than men. I don't know. I think I just read that. So it was not easy, but it wasn't hard in that I would get these amazing jobs and these amazing opportunities. The hard part was always like understanding what my value is compared to others, or thinking that the organization was going to give me the amount of money that I deserved based on the value that I was giving and or delivering. And that's not necessarily the case, right? And that definitely wasn't the case. And I had some great leaders. I had some great colleagues that helped me through some of those harder times and said, no, like, if you were a guy, you would ask for this. If you were, this is how I would do it. And they were male colleagues. And it was interesting because it's very different from the way I was doing it and the way I'm sure a lot of women are asking or not asking for what they think that they deserve.
Mm. It's so interesting because as I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing that there's a combination of the behaviors of others that sort of influence how you show up. And I don't mean you personally, but all of us, right? Influence how we show up. But then there's also our own mindset, which has the potential to get in our way. And it's hard to separate those two because which came first, right? The chicken or the egg?
Right. Absolutely. Like, what was it about is it that you're the only woman in that organization that causes you to act this way and behave this way, very tentative about your role? Is it at risk? Are you supposed to look like all of them and act like all of them and do the same things that they're doing? But then when you do you get ridiculed for it or put down for it, or you're not acting, I don't know. It's true. It's hard to tell which one is which.
Did you have any mentors or people that you could talk to more candidly that helped you sort of navigate some of that gray area?
Later in life, absolutely. I had some amazing leaders. So VPs of engineering and also my husband is very supportive and very much like, he's in tech. So he's like, no, you shouldn't do this. Or if you do this, speak from a place of abundance and confidence, right? So speak from a place of, your value. versus, oh, I think, if you think it's okay, give me whatever you want, or to the other point I made, don't say sorry before you start a sentence. Or if you have a really great idea, put out that really great idea. Because one thing I do think we do as women is we need to be almost 100% prepped for something before we go into it. So have confidence that you're ready to say whatever it is that you're saying, that you are probably in the right of whatever it is that you're talking about, because you've put a lot of time and effort into it. I think someone at one point said, yes, statistically, men will look at a job description when they're going for a job and they'll be like, oh yeah, 60% of that I can cover. The other 40% I'll learn on the job. Whereas I know I myself will go in and be like, oh no, I have to have 100% of everything here before I even think about applying. And then I'll still look at, do I have enough? And I don't know what the stat is on how many, on what women will be looking at across the board, but I know for me personally, that's how I do it. So as far as your question goes, yes. So I had my husband and I had some great leaders. And in that time, these great leaders, some of them were those types of multiplier leaders where, I'd do a presentation or something and my boss, my EVP would like text me right away and be like, you just nailed that. That was fantastic. And he would say, not just to me personally, he would say it out loud, right? Because if you want to be a multiplier, you do need to have to say it in front of others so that others realize that something happened and it was a good thing, and that person was the reason for it. And if you just say it to them, silently, it doesn't work as well.
That's right.
And then I had colleagues. Eventually I had colleagues who I had someone in my exact same role, but with responsible for 25% of the country, and I was responsible for 75% of the country. And he has an amazing wife who's had this very successful career. And he said, Carrie, I have a feeling that you and I doing the exact same job with you having more responsibility, I think that there's some inequality in what we're getting paid. And I was like, what? And I know you're really not supposed to talk about that, but he wanted to understand what I was getting paid and let me know what he was getting paid. And it was, 25% more than me. And so, he said, you need to do something about that, because that's not just for you, but for everyone else in this organization going forward. You need to work on that equality. And so I did. And when I first mentioned it to my boss, my direct boss, he was like, well, so-and-so has has some more experience than you do. And I said, okay, but we're doing the exact same job, same responsibilities. And I have 75% more responsibility because I have 75% of the country, which is a lot more people. And I'm killing it. So his experience and my experience are not a factor right now because it's all working and I'm doing the exact same thing. And it was like a light bulb. He was like, oh, it's so true.
Wow.
So he said, like, okay, so what do you want? And he went and he was able to do that. So that was a good leader to be able to do that and, take in that new information and understand that it made sense and then go to bat. He was able to do that. So I appreciated that. And interestingly enough, within the next 6 months, my colleague who had raised it in the first place was I took over head of the whole department. He was working for me, but with me. And he was perfectly fine with that because that's the type of person he was. He was like, he knew exactly the best way that the organization should be running, and it worked.
Wow.
So, yes, I had some great people in my life.
That's a great story. And I wonder, that there were a lot of forces at play there, right? You had a colleague who was willing to share that information and cared enough about you and wanting to make sure that equity existed. You had to show the courage to take that message to your manager, right? And then he had to be willing to listen and then take action. Do you have advice for other people listening who know they're in that situation or suspect that they're in that situation, but maybe haven't been given that same opening to be able to take that to their manager?
I would say if you're going to wait for your next conversation about a raise or a potential promotion, when you're getting feedback from your leader, be very prepared in why you deserve to be at level with those that are in the same role as you, right? So, I mean, it's really important to understand that experience is important to get the job, and experience is important to be able to do the job well. But if now you are already in and you have the job and you have been doing it well and you have the same responsibilities as someone else in that organization, that should be across the board a pretty close margin of what people are making for that value that you're adding, because you're adding the exact same value, or if you're adding, in my case, more, you need to be able to raise that, but be very prepared. And again, I'm sure you will be, because I got to say, I mean, women are always, they seem to be always very prepared because they want to make sure that they have their own little self-doubt in there, and so you want to kick that back. And so we're often very prepared due to that reason. And again, that could be a little self-sabotage. We're anxious about it. I don't know. But I would say, yeah, be prepared. Have like even a presentation of, which is what I did. I had a presentation of the differences and all the things that I was doing and all the things that others were doing. And then the differences. And it really was like, if you're in a list of, it was very heavily weighted on my side of all the things that were adding value. And actually, in this case, ROI, right? It was a revenue generating department. And so that's pretty important as well to an organization.
And I think you make a great point too, because that actually creates an opportunity for the decision to be made based on data, as opposed to being perceived as emotion on your part, right? Like you can't argue with the facts.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. Yes. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that. Yes, data.
Yeah.
Data will make the difference.
Yeah. Well, and I want to take a moment here too to get your thoughts on the difference between preparation and perfectionism, because I think sometimes, women in particular, when we think about being prepared, there's this sense that we never feel fully prepared because we can't anticipate every question we might be asked. I think a lot of this is like a carryover from school too, where we used to be really good students who would try to get the A+, and now in the workplace, we're still trying to get that A+, but it doesn't necessarily feel like we know what the rubric is. And so we're spending a lot of extra time and energy trying to put this perfect product together, whatever that is. And that, to your point, can end up being more of self-sabotage. So how have you navigated that? Like, how do you protect your time while still feeling like I'm putting forth the highest quality output?
So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said product, because I kind of lean on my Agile experience in history. So I lean on that in the sense that I say, okay, what is it? What are my goals? And what is the acceptance criteria for getting there? And so basically, how much time am I going to put into this? So if I have my goals as being, I want to get a raise, and in this particular case, I want to get a raise. And here are the reasons why I should get a raise. So my acceptance criteria was I was going to list out all of the things that I was doing that was adding value and or ROI to the organization. And then I was going to list out any of the arguments that I think might be coming up and have answers for those, right? So I was kind of trying to look at that future ball. I look into the future and see what my I say boss, but I didn't feel like he was a boss. He was more of a partner. But anyway, I was thinking what he might come back with and have answers for that, but not to the point where, I said like three arguments, and that was it, my limit. I didn't want to go too far down into that rat hole. So having really specific acceptance criteria was important to me so that I didn't. And once I had all those things in place, then I felt really confident about going forward, putting that presentation together and having that conversation and not going overboard. And then once you feel prepared, try not to stress about it, right? Yes, you're excited about it. Yes, you still get butterflies, but you're ready.
Yeah, I like that, because it sounds like you're kind of creating your own rubric, right? By deciding what are your goals and what does success look like, as opposed to feeling like there's just there's this mystery expectation out there that you're hoping you meet.
Right, exactly. Yes, take control of it. And, if you're the product owner of your own product, you can do that.
Yeah. And I wonder too about, we talked a little bit about the mentorship piece, but I also worry sometimes that it feels very dangerous to ask for help sometimes, right? And so sometimes I think the over preparing comes from a place of I have to think about every possible consideration, because if I ask a question, or if I go to somebody and say I need clarification, that might make me look like I don't actually know what I'm doing, or that I'm going to be exposing myself in some way. So how have you handled the being vulnerable and asking for help piece of the workplace?
Yeah. So, um, that in the beginning, I very much thought I had to pretend I knew everything, right? You have to be like, you don't want to, you think it's an area of weakness when you ask questions or when you're showing that vulnerability that you don't know everything. But I've quickly learned that, especially in today's world, people are learning and growing and changing so fast because we have access to so much information. So at this point, for us to think that we do know everything is arrogant, or we know more about something than the person that we're talking to. That comes off to me as arrogant, and I don't want to be there. So I don't know everything, and I'm perfectly fine with asking questions. And I read Lencioni's what is it, Getting Naked book as well, which is all about that. Like, no. It actually, consultants used to have to be know all be all, and now today, having that coaching aspect to your role of like the person that you're talking with, especially in a client, actually is the expert in what they're asking for. You just have to learn how to pull it out of them and let them know that you don't have all the answers for them, because you're not in their business on a day-to-day basis. It's their business. It's the same in this situation. You just have to be vulnerable and open yourself up. And I find that people embrace that for the most part. It used to feel like there was a little, corporate America might take advantage of that vulnerability. I don't see it as much anymore. I think it depends. Trust your gut. Obviously, you want to talk to people that you can trust to know that for the most part, you think they're going to help you, and appreciate the fact that you've opened up and you've shown that vulnerability and are willing to help. You'll find those people in mentors, across the board. But there might still be a little bit out there of people that would take advantage of that. So trust your gut on that one.
I think that's a good.
But I've been lucky.
Yeah, I mean, and people like that will take advantage of any opportunity they can, right? Because that's their own insecurities.
Yeah, those are the people that are taking credit for the work that you do and all those things. You'll see it. You'll ferret that out pretty fast, and then you're not going to go to them and give them any kind of vulnerability.
Exactly.
So yeah, trust is important in that.
How has your experience changed now that you have your own business, in terms of your own confidence as a leader? And has this made this harder for you? How has it shifted the things that you sort of worry about, or what does that look like?
Oh, yes. Yes, of course. I mean, so self-doubt's right there, right? How do you know you can do this? You can do this alone, or you're not alone. You have some partners. How much information do you share with your partners? Right now, it's very slow out there from a consulting perspective, right? Tech is strange in this economy today because there's still layoffs happening all over the place. So there's a lot of vulnerable people reaching out, a lot of people looking for work, and great, amazing people that bring value to organizations that have been let go for whatever reason. So it's difficult. So as a new leader, I mean, it'll be 3 years. How much of that stress and anxiety do I share with my team without making them anxious themselves, but also wanting to get their input, get innovative ideas. Let's think outside of the box. How are we going to keep moving forward here? I want them as partners. So I just ask them, how do you deal with stress, and how much information do you want to share here? And so we have working agreements across the board. And that works really well, I find. Anytime, well, I do it before it happens, but anytime you have any dysfunction in a team, right, you want to talk about a working agreement. And it's usually around expectations. So I set those expectations with my team beforehand. to make sure that we're not doing anything that would be stepping on each other's toes or making people feel insecure. It doesn't mean that we don't have hard conversations or conflict ever, because that's not reality. It just means that we're setting ourselves up for the most part to have good partnership relations, and everything comes down to relationships. Did I answer the question?
You did. And I'm really glad you said that, because that is my inclination too, is when in doubt, talk about it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Otherwise we're just going to be making up stories and worrying and playing the what if game. And if we can just sit down and have a conversation, we can be honest with each other and come to, a place that I love that you talk about, these sort of, what did you call them? Working agreements. I love the idea of just really defining what does everybody need in order to feel like they can do their best work, or that they can be part of this conversation in the most effective way possible. And I think we're so quick to jump into the work, and we don't take the time to actually establish this type of trust and connection. And people will often say, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm thinking, you don't have time not to, because you're spending a lot of time cleaning up the mess that happens when you don't do this. So I love that that's part of the way that you operate, because I just think it creates so much more psychological safety and efficiency.
Yeah, I feel strongly about working agreements for any team. Absolutely. And to your point, if you have a problem and you bring it to your team, you're going to find a much better solution when you're solutioning together. Again, because people are learning and have different experiences at different rates. And, it's crazy to think that you're going to be able to do all this on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you could, why? It's more fun and more interesting to do it with other people.
Right. And that's one of the biggest things I miss about working with a large organization is like I saw a bunch of my my colleagues, my previous colleagues at an event, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the team's all back together. And I do have this little team, and it's awesome, and I love them. But I also miss having that more collaborative. Part of that is COVID too, but having that more collaborative team. And so we decided we're getting together, we're just going to get together and collaborate together on things. And it's okay. Who cares who or where you're going? The stuff that you're talking about and solutioning around are things that everybody's dealing with.
That's a great tip too. I think, especially given the volatility, a lot of people, like you said, who have been laid off, or there've been sort of reorgs that have separated teams, you can still stay in relationship, right? Still continue to support each other.
Right.
Is there anything else that you do to manage your own self-doubt? Anything that you are consciously doing to kind of tame that voice that creeps in at inconvenient moments?
Yeah. So I just try to be very aware of it. And when it is popping up, like I take it for what it is. I don't automatically just dismiss. I check it to see, is there a valid reason? Am I not fully prepared? Is there anything else I can do to make myself feel more prepared about that? And often the case is no. So then I'll check it and I'll be like, okay, I appreciate, but no, like I got this. So I guess you gotta do that whole like self, talk to yourself a little bit.
Yes.
But know that you do got it. And if you can't do that in the beginning, you have some great friends. I like to call myself a girlfriend's girlfriend, but I have some great friends that will be absolutely, like, let me tell you about this talk I'm coming to do. And what do you think, how do you think they're going to take it from me? And like getting feedback from people that you love and respect. I shouldn't say love, people that you respect from a business perspective. That will give you honest feedback. It helps a lot. Yeah. And they're not just saying it to say it,
Right. Yeah. And I love that awareness piece. I think that is so important, is to come at it from a more analytical perspective of, okay, I'm feeling this way for a reason. What's it trying to tell me? Have I done everything that I can? Right. And then once you've realized I have, just kind of have to let it go. And it's a nervousness. It's a certain, I love the expression that I heard once that said the only difference between anxiety and excitement is the story you tell yourself. right? And so a lot of times
Right.
we're interpreting that nervous energy as anxiety and doubt, when if we just tell our brains, I'm excited about this, I get to do
Right.
this, you know, scary
Right.
thing, but it's an exciting next step in my career, right? Like your
Right.
brain is not a fact checker. It believes what you tell it.
Right. And it doesn't mean it necessarily goes away. Like someone asked me recently, we did a presentation in front of about close to 50 people, and someone said, "Do you get nervous about those things still? Because you've done so many of those and you've done them for larger audiences and stuff." And I said, "Oh yeah, every single time I get nervous." And he was like, "Why? Why do you get nervous still?" And I said, "No, I think it's just I'm excited, but I'm also like, how you don't know. You have all these people, you don't know what's going to get thrown at you." And it's that old thing where like you have to be prepared for everything, but you don't. So as long as you know that you can go out there and you can tell stories, and then if you do get stuck, you could say, "You know what? That's a phenomenal question. I don't have the answer right off the bat, but let me have, your information, and I would love to get back to you on that." And that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I often say, as somebody who has struggled with a lot of anxiety, prepare for what you're most afraid of, because then everything else will feel manageable. And a lot of times, what we're most afraid of is being asked a question we don't have the answer to. And to your point, right? Like that's going to happen and it's not a big deal. And we live in a world where there is so much information that nobody can be expected to have all of
Right.
the answers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
So yeah, be brave.
Be brave. That's a great way to say it. Yeah, Carrie, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate your sharing your story and your insights. I think so many can relate to what you have shared. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, your work, learn more about you?
I think probably, and thank you, Kim. And it's always great talking with you. I really appreciate it. But I think as far as getting in touch with me, I think the best place is LinkedIn. I do look at it all of the time, and it's a great place. So whether you want to get in touch with me from a personal perspective to talk, to mentor or whatever, or if you want to get in touch with me from a business perspective and that you are looking for some help with creating high-performing teams or Agile or whatnot, LinkedIn, absolutely.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that your LinkedIn link is in the show notes as well. Thank you again, Carrie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great seeing you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.